Is there a doctor in the house?
Doctor, you have a visitor in the main lobby.
Welcome to Talk To The Doc podcast, the show where strategy meets cybersecurity and leadership meets technology. I'm your host, Steve the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is in. Our guest today is the founder of the cybersecurity community, Right of Boom, and also the face that launched 1,000 ships. Let's welcome Andrew Morgan today. How are you doing today, my friend?
Good. Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate you having me in, and
Sure.
really proud of what you're doing here. It's awesome.
You know, you're my hero, so I'm just trying to be a little bit like you. Just we're all fighting that battle of a high tide rises all boats, and the more we can give back, the more we can share, the more we can work together, the better things are going to be for all of us.
Agreed.
Now, I didn't do you justice with a quick intro, so do you mind telling us just a little bit more about yourselves for our guests?
Yeah. So, Steve, as I understand, mainly your listeners, right, are people in the small to medium enterprise, fair. So in my world, my 30 years have been spent on organizations that serve small to medium enterprises, originally called system integrators and value-added resellers, Steve, back in the day. And I know you go back that far as well. But these are commonly now called managed service providers and managed security service providers. And what I do is I have a weekly podcast called the CyberCall that's in its sixth season now, and we do it weekly. And every week we try to bring on some type of educator, whether it has to do with a current threat, a trend in cybersecurity, or helping these managed service providers and security providers be better operationally at their business so that they can do a better job for the people listening to this. And then about now going on its fifth year, we're coming into, I built a cybersecurity conference, about 1,000 MSPs and a little over like 1,250 people show up at the MGM in Las Vegas, where we do a 3.5-day conference and bring in the best educators and leaders, again, helping this same group get better at delivering security services and running their businesses.
Absolutely. And that's a large part of why I thought you'd be a great guest, just, talking about things operationally. Sometimes in the world of cybersecurity, we get so focused on the acronyms, the metrics, the things that are the daily grind. But, for the typical small business owner, just understanding the process, just understanding how they can be part of it, what's so important to have that voice in the room, just makes for better decisions for the organization. And I thought you'd bring a little bit of that operational insight and to help our audience out.
Thanks for having me again, Steve.
Well, like every good doctor's appointment, I always like to start off with some metrics, some ideas of things. I think every executive, every manager, every leader can latch on to a metric, kind of dive into that. So in your mind, I always like to start off with a pulse. What would you say is a metric that's kind of shaping this state of the market from your point of view?
Again, I'm going to look at this through the lens of this, end customer, the lawyer, the doctor's office, the architectural firm, whatever business you're in looking at this, Steve. And before I go into specific metrics, because, I think we've been metric to death. Like, for example, only 39% of businesses out there still use multi-factor authentication, right? Or, this threat is, a certain percent, or this many people have been socially, clicked on something and have had a business email compromise. I think the more important thing is a theme. And here's the theme. Humans are poor judges of risk. So let me kind of double click on what I mean by that, Steve. I don't think there's a business owner out there or, executive team that doesn't want to protect their business, reduce risk, right? Protect their revenue, their clients, their supply chain, I don't think there's one person that's malintended. I live in Florida, right? And we have hurricanes. And every year when there's a hurricane, if you're in a flood zone or you're in an evacuation zone, there's always people, you hear these stories. I've been here 85 years, nothing ever happens. I'm in Tampa and we don't really get hit and blah, blah, blah. Right? There's the mentality that this isn't going to happen to us. It hasn't happened to us, so it won't happen to us. And there's been so much news over the years. There isn't a day that goes by that this big organization has been attacked. This big organization has had a breach. Breach meaning the difference between, for those out there, there's the saying, you don't use the B word until it's known that you have an actual breach. A breach means the difference between a cyber attack, where you could have ransomware and your computers and systems are unavailable, is a very different thing than a breach. A breach means there's been data exfiltration, and therefore you could have sensitive data. Maybe it's your clients, you're an attorney with intellectual property, IP, and now, or you're a healthcare provider and your patient data has been exfiltrated, meaning it's been taken, and now you have reporting requirements and you're in a lot hotter water. So I say all that to say, Steve, to me, what's more important these days for businesses, about specific, numbers and metrics, is to really take a look at your team and ask yourselves, are we taking risk? Are we the common person which says this isn't going to happen to us? We underrate. There's great case studies and great psychological papers on humans are poor judges of risk. So that's where I would start everybody off with. Are you willing to be that vulnerable and sit down with your team and just talk about that internally?
Yeah, absolutely. From my point of view, I always like to start here. Sometimes I tell the story about when I first got into the business. I used to hate how engineers would say it depends so often. I mean, I know it depends. Everybody knows it depends. All I need is to be armed. What happens if I go left? What happens if I go right? So to me, the goal of the metric is to help guide somebody into the left or rightness of something. Not the left and right as in boom, but the left and right as in, if I decide this way, here's the implications. If I decide this way, here's the implications. And so, I find it helpful just to kind of guide someone and know whether to figure out, am I a lifter or a leaner? Am I approaching this from the point of I'm being aggressive, I'm being more thorough, on the top end of it, or I'm below the line? It doesn't matter where you are. There's no right or wrong space. I think to your point, it all depends on your capacity for risk, your capacity for budget, your capacity for everything. Maybe you just don't have the time. Everyone's going to be on one side or the other. Nobody's perfect. If we were all perfect, there wouldn't be cyber incidents. But anyways, I guess thinking about kind of the market space and SMBs, what's something that they could take away and try and figure out, hey, am I lucky or am I good as far as a number?
That's a great question, Steve. I think what you said a moment ago is a really, really important thing, right? Is what kind of risk tolerance do you have, right? When it comes to our money, as an example, right? We think about our risk, right? Especially, as we age, right? You have this nest egg. Well, we think about our risk tolerance and investment, right? As a young person, I can be a lot more aggressive, right, with my money. As I get to, maybe I have children, I have to start thinking about other things and I have to change my risk strategy. And when I start to think about retirement and my income changes, I have to think differently, right? And I think the same thing holds true when it comes to your business and risk. We've been, for many years as a small to medium business, we were very fortunate. Let me explain what I mean by that, Steve. Probably up until 2018, we were kind of not really targets of threat actors. I'm not saying there weren't drive-bys and small to medium businesses didn't get affected by cyber threats. But predominantly, cybersecurity was really a focus of the enterprise, right? And that's where the threat actors target what are called nation state threat actors. These are organized groups that are sponsored by, whether it's Russia, China, etc. Come 2018 and beyond, right? Just like we as individuals and companies have taken advantage of automation, technology, in our own business, that's also given way to threat actors. And it really hit full tilt, if you all remember, around the pandemic, right? The pandemic was, on one hand, incredible in the sense of what they call modern digital transformation, right, Steve? We saw immense gains, and I'll come back to the risk portion. I didn't forget about this. I just want to set the stage for the audience. On one hand, we saw immense gains with technology from the pandemic. It was really the first time in our modern era where something obviously very bad, like a pandemic, gave way to this new era of working remotely, if you recall, Steve. And obviously, that's changed a little bit. People are coming back to the workforce. But what did working remotely do? Well, on one hand, it provided a mass efficiency and cut a massive amount of costs in businesses, right? Because they didn't have the overhead that they previously did. They were able to trim a lot of their operational expenses through this new means of work. Technology gave way to that.
Sure.
But technology also gave way these remote mechanisms, as you and I know, Steve, and I won't get into the weeds for the audience, but working remotely gave a whole new way in which the threat actor could attack environments at scale. And, if you think about it, if you're just this one entity, I've got to target one entity. But now if my one entity, Steve, has people all over connecting back into me, I've got a lot more opportunity to get to the mothership, right? So I come back, I kind of paint the picture of how the landscape has changed. And now coming back to our risk tolerance, back to, taking it from financial back to business. And I think one thing that if you're working with a managed service provider, and I think you do a phenomenal job at this, Steve, your managed service provider often talks about technology in terms that you may not understand, right? As business owners, we understand revenue, right? Growth, reputation, our supply chain, our contractual obligations. On the other hand, our technology providers, Steve, are often talking about speeds and feeds, a lot of acronyms. You have risk here, you have risk here, you have risk here. What I would ask those sitting here is think about where their most critical systems, what business systems drive the largest percent of your revenue, right? What processes, what people constitute the largest section of your revenue, and look at that. Do you have risk in any of those areas? And as you just said, Steve, earlier, and I'm going to paraphrase you, you're saying, look, I'm not asking you to, if you're spending, I'm making it up, if you're spending $3,000 a month today on your IT and security, I'm not saying you should spend $10,000. I'm saying you have risk in this area, that I see that there's structural weakness here that could impact, your supply chains or disrupt, your ability to generate revenue or take you offline in a given day. And what does that cost you? And are you willing to take that risk? If you are, awesome. Accept the fact that you just took that risk, but be okay on the other side. It's the old, everybody wants an insurance policy after their roof gets blown off of their house. They didn't get flood insurance. Then they want the policy. So just understand your risk tolerance, look at what runs the business, look at what drives revenue, and then back into have conversations. And if you do have a managed service provider, try to help them if they don't understand how to have risk to revenue conversations, right? Coach them a little bit, say, like, what does that mean? If I don't do this, how can it impact my revenue? How can it impact my systems, right? So,
I think working with small business owners, board members, council members. The thing I've taken away over 30 years is most of them are high Ds and they don't need to understand how everything works. They just need to know just enough briefly so they can make quick decisions on things. Because, when we talk about risk, we're talking about it in the vein of IT, but risk could be, I need to replace that forklift. Risk could also be, I've got this aging building. Risk could be a lot of other things that they need to do within the organization. And IT is just one of those risks, along with all the other things going on in their organization. And, that really, once I figured that out, then, it made it easier to kind of see everything in the vein of, risk, investment, those kinds of things for an organization.
That's a really important point, Steve. And again, it's like, to your point, like, hey, we're a manufacturer and, this forklift is breaking down. Let's just say, to your point, and we got to get a new forklift. And that new forklift is $80,000. At the same time, maybe they're a manufacturer, Steve, and they have a contract. They're in what's called the defense industrial base supply chain, right? And, with the new compliance regulations, if they're working with a provider, a service provider, that service provider is going to say, yeah, I understand you need that forklift, but you also have this $8 million contract that's in the supply chain with Lockheed Martin. What happens if you get a security audit and you aren't compliant and you lose that contract? I'm not here to tell you don't buy the forklift, but I am here to tell you you're risking an $8 million contract. That's your decision. That's where you as the board and the executive team have to weigh. I can tell you this, a story if I could, Steve, because I think stories are important. I think stories are meaningful to business owners. So again, I work with organizations that provide IT and security, like a company like yours, Steve. And this MSP, managed service provider, was saying to me out of frustration, they're like, we focus on advertising and marketing firms. And I see risk here, here, and here. I'm really concerned about them because they have structural weakness. They have security risk here, here, and here. And I cannot get them to move. Okay. We don't have the budget. We've been trying for over a year. And we had this conversation. About 3 months later, I get a phone call and they're like, you're not going to believe this. And they said not one, but two of our clients are actually just said to us, not blank check, Steve, but I think it was like they were spending about $4,000 a month and they were suggesting to do these upgrades and they were going to be spending $7,000 a month. So significant increase. Yeah. And I said, so what happened? How did all of a sudden they find budget? Well, they said their largest client, in both cases, their largest client actually did have compliance and regulatory requirements. And in their audit, in the bigger customer, right, the customer of the MSP's customer, in their audit, they pushed down a big security questionnaire. And it basically said, if you want to continue to keep doing business with us as our advertising and marketing firm, you have to do this, and give us proof that you're doing these things in your business with our images, with our data, how you handle our data, how you store our intellectual property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's amazing when you go to potentially losing your largest customer, how fast you will find budget.
Right.
And that's the thing that I would implore the listeners to think about. A lot of times they're like, oh, we're good. We don't need anything. Think about what can your largest customers look like. Is there the chance that they could send you a security questionnaire that maybe it was 2 pages last year that could show up and it's 16 pages this year as far as requirements? we are seeing that more and more and more. And there's a saying, Steve, compliance rolls downhill, right? You listening here on this podcast may not go, well, I'm not in a regulated industry. Are your largest clients? Are your largest clients going for some type of specific regular audit, or implementing a security program, like something called ISO, or going through a SOC 2, or they are regulated? So I would implore you to think about not just you, but who your largest customers are, who their largest customers are, because more and more we're seeing, like I said, compliance is rolling downhill. And that's when you don't want to be waiting and all of a sudden have a potential, revenue challenge that could impact your business substantially.
Yeah, I think that's always the thing is, the speed of business, the sooner you know about those things, the sooner you ask those questions, the better off you are in protecting that revenue or that potential revenue, because there is, an enormous, and not just legally and contractually, all the security frameworks, within the past 5 years have rolled out all these third-party risk categories, just being mindful of the supply chain, because in a lot of the breaches that we've seen, it wasn't the actual organization that got breached, it was their third-party vendors. So we're seeing a lot more diligence as well, flowing downhill who their top clients are, but also, making sure that, any of their vendors are also secure or doing things to kind of protect themselves.
Steve, we saw this with, it was an ADP or Reynolds and Reynolds, so forgive me. The car industry, there's a software, and I'm drawing a blank on it right now. Steve, maybe you can help me. But earlier this year, if it comes to me, I'll think about it. But let's say an auto dealer, right? There was a software that was compromised by a threat actor that impacted over 15,000 auto dealers. Now, the auto dealers themselves, right, they weren't attacked. However, the system that drove and ran all their operations, all their revenue, everything, their ability to sell a vehicle was completely taken offline. That one supply chain attack was somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 billion of losses amongst auto dealerships, right? We could take the Okta incident, which is an identity provider, or we all have probably heard about what happened with CrowdStrike this year. CrowdStrike's, in layman's terms, it's an antivirus. It's much more, but it's an endpoint security product. They pushed code incorrectly. And, they did an update incorrectly. It cost Delta Airlines over $4 billion and, completely missing their quarter. So we need to think about third-party risk more, things that are like, oh God, do I really need to think about this? Unfortunately, you do. You do need to start to think more about who your suppliers are. And if you are somebody that has cyber insurance, by the way, if you don't, please get it. It's fast. But even, if you have cyber insurance today, in order to keep your cyber insurance or get more, coverage, right? You're seeing requirements go up and up and up because the losses have been so great to the insurance companies. They want to make sure you have the proper, I'm using an industry buzzword, it's called security controls. Basically, that you have the proper safeguards in place so they're willing to give you your policy and maintain your policy. So those are some things that I think business leaders really need to think about and consider.
Now, you named your organization Right of Boom, dealing with things after an incident occurs. What are your opinions about left of boom investment?
Yeah, so just for the audience, right of boom and left of boom, or boom, actually came from the military, Steve. It was a term that was used. It had to do with IEDs, explosive devices. The military obviously wanted to. Left of boom is all your preparation, right? We don't want to step or run over an implosive device. And right a boom would be, God forbid we did, what's our respond and recover ability, right? So cybersecurity got cute and picked up. Oh, we can use that in cyber. I got fortunate and the domain was available after watching it for many years and hence. But, in terms of left the boom or what can organizations do, I think, I don't want to say it's simple, but I think there are some non-negotiables. Let me explain what
Okay.
I mean on that, Steve. I think first and foremost, a non-negotiable is your culture, right? And here's what I mean by that. People are like, what do you mean my culture? Well, if you're not if risk and, protecting your organization doesn't start at the top, how do you expect your employees to care? Right? And the number one way in which companies are attacked is through what's called social engineering. Most common way is you get an email, right? And it looks like it's from Steve. I know Steve. Steve sent me an email. Well, if I'm not careful, I don't know that maybe Steve's environment got compromised and that this email that seemingly looks like it's coming from Steve may not be Steve. So there's things called security awareness training and phishing simulations. This is testing your employees and training your employees on things to look for. But and a lot of you might be sitting there going, we have that, right? Well, yeah, a lot of organizations do. And by the way, it's required in any regulated industry. So the question is, well, why are so many people still falling for social engineering attack? Well, I would argue because the leadership hasn't really embraced a culture that, number one, makes being vulnerable and training your people safe. What do I mean by that, Steve? Like historically, security awareness training is I'm the employee, I'm being tested, I click on a link, you're bad, you need to take these more training courses. That's really how it works. I would more argue for, look, embrace that. It's okay. We want to help you improve. We're in this as a team. It's not you're the employee who did it wrong and messed up. It's, hey, we're a team. Let's work on this together. Number one. So first and foremost is the culture and training your people, because that is the number one way attacks happen, through social engineering. The second thing is most organizations have moved to the cloud and use things like, Steve, what percent of your customers use Microsoft 365 these days? What?
I mean, there's only like a small minority of Google Workspace.
But everybody's in the cloud.
Pretty much everyone's Office 365.
Yeah. So then the next part is, do you have some type of security detection around your Office 365 environment, right? If you're working with an MSP, ask them, like, what are you doing around Office 365 to protect me? Do you have, beyond, like, walk me through what you do there? There's some very, good solutions out there that look for and can, through behavioral, what I mean behavioral, Steve, meaning patterns that don't look right, they can detect these threats. So Office 365 is, so we go from, and those go hand in hand, right, Steve? Because phishing comes through your email, right? Social engineering comes through your email. That is just such a critical area to focus on. The other area is predominantly, again, Steve, we're using SaaS-based applications. And most organizations have remote workers. There's a term, VPN, virtual private networks. If you're on them, again, highly encourage you investing in getting off of virtual private networks and getting into some type of, sorry for the buzzword, but I'll explain it, zero trust network access, or SASE, secure access, secure edge. What these mean is you're getting off of your VPN and moving to a solution that is much harder for your remote employees to be compromised. There isn't probably a week that goes by, Steve, that some VPN is in the news.
Yeah, it's every vendor, SonicWall, Fortinet, pretty much Cisco just recently. There's everybody's in the news for that.
So to Steve's point, I want everybody to hear this loud and clear. This isn't go pick on your vendor. This is threat actors are picking. We're dealing with what's called legacy code, meaning old code that's been written. And because there's something called tech debt, meaning this code's old, threat actors can move faster. So it's patched, it's fixed by the vendor, and then threat actors find a new way to exploit it. It's a cat and mouse, and this cat and mouse game isn't going to end. So I highly encourage you. This is an area, it would be like, if I could spend your money for you, this would be an area. If you have remote workers using VPNs, please get off of them. You are definitely. And then multi-factor authentication. People say, well, multi-factor is inconvenient or this, that, or the other, Steve. You really need multi-factor anywhere, or go to a passwordless solution, some type of combined single sign-on. But if you look with what I just shared, if you were to work on those areas of protecting your business, you might sit there and say, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? Yes, there's a ton of other things you can focus on. I'm not saying that is it. But if you want to look at where our SMBs attack the most, I just gave them to you. High percentage, that's it. You might say, well, what about my endpoints and this and that? Most EDRs, endpoint detections, like if you're using Steve, I guarantee you his endpoint detection is really good. And threat actors are they're pretty good these days. It's way easier for me to compromise your VPN, and it's way easier for me to socially engineer you than to bother trying to get into your endpoint. So
yeah, I think I think some of it ties back to what you're talking about, the inflection point of COVID. For myself, I've had my CISSP for 20 years, and about the time of COVID, it kind of became apparent to me that everything I learned about cybersecurity had evolved, and the whole everything outside your network trying to come in. I realized that Office 365 is like this great big gaping hole in the middle of everything that we do, that everybody in the organization has access to, and that I had to really up my game and understand more about the policies, the workflows, the systems, how they all interconnect, all of those kinds of things. And I'm sure it's similar to how just the change, the modern workforce, as you put it, that modern work where things are hybrid. You don't have the traditional things, or you don't have the protections and other things that now you've got people working from home and coffee shops and mobile on the road and in the airport. All of those things that you've got to protect against even more. Office 365 is that big opportunity for every threat actor. It's like, hey, I know everyone's got access to it. I know everybody's checking an email. Everyone's getting messages. And, it's definitely been a very rapid response to try to make sure that we had our arms around everything there, kind of moving away from the old guard way that I like to think about it as how I used to be. A noble knight protecting my peoples via the old techniques. Kind of had to move to modern warfare and use more bow and arrow and catapults and other kinds of things to protect our clients.
Yeah. A few other things, if I could, Steve, just for the audience to think about that are, I think, when I say easy, it just takes a little bit of effort. And again, if you work with a provider like yourself, Steve, just talk to them about it. Number one, threat actors love credentials. So without getting into this whole thing, just trust me that there's an entire ecosystem. Like the threat actors, they are way more operationally mature than most businesses. So there's literally groups that all they do is focus on getting credentials, your passwords, your user IDs and passwords, right, from organizations and selling them. Okay. So why is that? Why am I bringing that to your attention? Well, credential abuse or using, stolen credentials is one of the top ways in which they just They don't need to attack you. They have your identity. Your identity is really the most important thing. It used to be about, protecting your device. It's your identity, because your identity moves. So a few things that you can really do to bring that threat down. Number one, please, whatever you do not store your passwords in your browser. Again, for humoring everybody here, there's malware out there called info stealers. And what is an info stealer, Steve? An info stealer, you accidentally click on something or go to a site, and these info stealers literally get into your password vault in your browser and take everything. Well, most people use the same passwords and user IDs for many things, and that's how
I've never heard of that. That's
never.
brand new. That must be a new trend, Andrew. I've never heard that before.
Well played, Steve. So that's one thing. Please, again, what is your policy? Most small to medium businesses don't have strong policy or what they call governance. But think about, hey, do we have a policy on that? Can anybody do whatever they want with their browsers? Have we standardized on a browser? Another thing, right? Do we lock down our browsers and where they can go and what they can do? So realize your credentials, your identity, protect that with everything you can. So I did want to point that out, Steve, that is absolutely, to me, one of these things that is fairly easy, not expensive, and can literally mean the difference between a threat actor getting into your environment and not getting into your environment. The other thing, Steve, is, and I don't know if you probably have never heard this from a prospect, Steve, but we have nothing a threat actor wants.
Yeah.
Right? Have you heard that?
That's also brand new. That's also brand new.
Yeah. And you might be sitting there, right? We're too small. The threat actor doesn't care about us. We have nothing a threat actor wants. Please understand, those are the biggest. If you're saying that, or if you had said that before, let me kind of share with you why I want to demystify that. Number one, a threat actor this isn't personal. A threat actor does not care about you individually. A threat actor is financially motivated, unless, of course, we're talking about espionage or nation state threat actors.
There's unique situations.
Absolutely. Yeah, but by and large, a threat actor is financially motivated. Okay, so my question is, if you're sitting there saying they'd have nothing they would want from me, my next question is, do you have money? Do you have a bank account? Right? And you go, well, what a silly question to ask me, Andrew. Of course I do. Okay, well, business email compromise, and I'll explain what that is if you don't know, is rampant and arguably one of the top attacks going on still to this day. And what business email compromise simply is, Steve, is I find a way to get into your account, and what's called spear phishing. Let me explain. I get into your network. I compromise Steve Meek's Office 365 account. Now I'm sitting in there acting as Steve. I send an email from Steve to the controller. And I say to the controller, Steve, we've made some changes. We were working with the supplier. They changed their routing and account numbers from here to here. Can you please update their payment information and send this, right? This is common. There's a multitude of ruses, by the way, of what I just said. And you may be victim of this, and you may have some stories, Steve, but I'll wrap it up with this is, number one, have a policy on changing your bank account. Always, because you cannot necessarily prevent a really good motivated threat actor from compromising your account and spear phishing. If a threat actor wants to get into your environment, I hate to tell you, they're going to get in. If a really good, qualified, motivated threat actor wants in, they will get in. What you can do, though, is have a policy to say, we never change bank account information without multi-steps that are manual. I call up Steve. I go, Steve, hey, it's Andrew. Got an email from you. Did you change bank accounts? And he'll go, what are you talking about? Well, right then. Now, what we also want to do is have further verifications that, hey, Steve, what I need you to do is then I need you to go ahead and send me a form that looks like this, and this, stating you want these changes. And I need that sent to me in physical mail. Yes, it's going to delay things. However, we will not. So whatever your policy and process is, have that in place. Those little things can save you literally hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, depending on your payments and supply chain.
Yeah, definitely. I think that back to your point about executive involvement, that's where that culture, the executive can really be that leader of, hey, I know there's these things out there. I don't know what they are, but we need to come up with protections for these. We need to come up with procedures for these. We need to, if I call you and request this, it's okay to call me back and make sure, or if you get an email from me that says whatever, feel comfortable reaching back out to me or anyone on the executive team to verify it, in person, face to face, verbally, whatever that method is, because it's, sometimes if the culture is very top down, nobody wants to ask a question. Everyone just follows blindly. And you really need that executive to set the tone of, no, please, I want you to call. No, we need to ask. We need to verify all of those kinds of things. Because that's that not wanting to challenge authority is how a lot of that gets through.
And I'm really glad you brought that up, Steve, about protocol, right? Like, if you work with the Fulcrum Group, a lot of the most common attacks these days are, hey, I'm your IT company. I need you to go to this. We've heard you've gotten a lot of spam. Here's a great, you've heard this ruse, Steve. I'll give you one that's very common right now. So I call up and I say, hey, I'm with your IT company and we heard you're getting a lot of spam. Why do they know that you're getting a lot of spam? Well, because they've sent you a ton of spam.
It's there.
So they're the ones, a threat actor has been sending you the spam. So they know that, first of all, they've set the stage where now your guard's going to come down. Oh yeah, I have been getting a lot of spam. Hey, I need you to go to this website and download this thing so I can get into your account and fix some stuff for you. Again, this is to your point, Steve, where you come back and go, look, at the Fulcrum Group, we will never call in and do that. Let me share with you, if we're going to initiate a phone conversation with you guys about something, how we do it. We identify, we have a two-step factor that, we're going to ask for identification, back and forth, yada, yada, yada. So again, I'll keep harping on this. If you have good leadership, good culture, good policy, and just a few left of boom things that you started off the conversation by asking, Steve, it doesn't require a ton of budget, but it does require some operational and organizational leadership to change the potential risk in your organization.
Thanks for that. I really appreciate you walking through all of those kinds of things. One of the since you brought up budget, I'm wondering, in your position, in your unique position, this past year we did like this, I called it my security officer initiative, where we kind of came out, talked about the shared risk model, kind of engaged with our clients, talked about areas and gaps and those kinds of things. But one of the questions that I felt came up in different fashions was, how much should I be spending on cybersecurity? Which I didn't have a great answer for. I kind of talked about, we're CIS aligned. So I talked about the 56 controls and IG1 and some of that, but that's not what's important. My question to you is, do you have any guidance for a small organization who's trying to figure out how much to spend? Are there guides out there that, or commonalities that you can share from your position?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. And, again, I think one of those, it's one of those things where, can you, give a stat? Like, sure, I could give what because enterprises are the ones that are typically, they spend, 12% of, their budget on security and whatever it may be, right? What I think's really important, aside from it should be this much, I think there's two ways to look at this. Number one, poverty line security. Like, there are certain things that if you don't have these in place, and you pretty much your odds of, you're on the high risk spectrum, right? And again, we've talked a lot about those today. Mm-hmm. Today, if you're at an individual employee level, to do security and have good policy, good security leadership, what they call a fractional chief information security officer like Steve, you got to be spending in the neighborhood of about 200 per employee per month minimum, right? If you're not spending that much money, let's just think about it. You're a 20 employee company. Let's just say you're a 20 employee law firm, and you're spending, let's just say, $4,000 a month with Steve. Based on your revenue and your payroll, that's peanuts. It's really peanuts, because think about this. If you're a law firm and you're 15 lawyers or whatever it is, 10 lawyers and, 4 paralegals can't bill for a day, tell me how expensive that is for a minute, right? So there's the poverty line, Steve. And then certain organizations that have compliance, regulatory requirements can be wildly different. So we'll see, if we're dealing with, let's just say a hedge fund, like you're the Dallas region, right, Steve? Yes. Let's just say we're dealing with a sophisticated family office or a large hedge fund that's, moving, has billions of dollars and, trading systems, and look, I mean, highly different, drastically different risk and requirements, right? In terms of, regulation, reporting, etc. I've seen, hedge funds in the 450 to 500 a seat region and not even blink at it. Why? Because they're managing billions of dollars. If they're spending, so what if they're spending $50,000 a month on their IT? They have a few hundred people, and or whatever the proportion is, right? It's peanuts. So again, it's easy for me to sit here and spend your money and be flippant about it. It really comes down to what's the risk of, in what kind of clientele do you have? I always look at it if you're offline, right? A good exercise, and then we'll round things out here, Steve, with something called the tabletop exercise. The tabletop exercise, Steve, is going through a simulation of being down. And let's also, if we have a minute, Steve, just talk about AI. We can't end without talking about AI, but let's just talk about a tabletop. A tabletop would be Steve comes in and says, hey, look, we're going to do an exercise. We need your executives. We need your people that are responsible for your key systems, IT. All right. I'm going to give you guys a scenario. You walk in this morning, right? You're a manufacturing facility with 50 employees, 3 locations. You walk in and all systems are down. You can't access anything. You've had a ransomware incident. The threat actors have a note sitting there waiting for you. The first thing to do is ask yourself, number one, what's that cost you per day? Just just random, like ballpark, right? Number two, can we pay our employees? Most importantly, do we have a plan? Do we know what we're going to do if that happened? Do we have cyber insurance? Do we know who we're going to call? Do we have a communication strategy or a comms tree? Who are we going to call first, second, third? Oftentimes, it's like, oh, so-and-so is the CEO. That's the person that should be in charge. Well, maybe the CEO is a highly emotional person. Wrong person to be in charge. It should be the COO or the CFO who's a lot less emotional to make better decisions. So do you have an incident response plan? Do you have a disaster recovery plan? Do we have a continuity plan? What would you do? Walk through that for 3 hours, 4 hours with Steve, and then do a postmortem. What would you change if you walked in today and that happened? And, thank God this was just an exercise. What did we learn, right? Really, really inexpensive way to figure out, did we have the right policies? Did we have the right communication strategies? Where did we fall down? And Steve will lead you. A good person like Steve will lead you through. Oh, then you found out it's kind of like Clue, right, Steve? You walk in
Really
and then
is.
he gives you bits of information. Oh, well, you didn't realize this. Now you realize this. Then, but that 3 or 4 hours can literally save your bacon. So I highly encourage anybody to do a tabletop. And then let's close maybe with AI, Steve. AI is the buzzword. Everybody should use AI, efficiency, this, the other.
Yeah, I do have to take a step back though. When he
Yeah.
said it's like Clue, it's kind of like when my wife has a really good story to tell, but she doesn't remember any of the details. So she, it's kind of like that. Hey, remember that movie with that guy who said that thing and he was holding in his right arm that other thing? There's like these disparate types of clues that I have
Yep.
to somehow piece together and figure out exactly what she's trying to say. But you're right. It's we actually early on, so we're scaling up management framework, and so I actually borrowed from them. They have this thing called PACE, the process accountability chart. But the whole point of it is for organizations, you ask them, what are your top 4 to 7 processes and who owns it? But I borrowed that, a lot of stuff. There's a lot of relations between things. I borrowed that for our fractional CIOs when they're out interviewing our clients when we're first onboarding them, trying to find out what those most important processes are, because for each one of those processes, there's technologies that may or may not be associated with it, but it kind of helps us start us down that path of knowing what those systems are before we get to the hey, let's sit down and do a tabletop. But
Hey, look, a great question to ask. And when I ask this question, you're going to go, why would you ask such a silly question? But here's the question, Steve. How do you make money, right?
yeah,
And you might say, is it you're listening to this and go, why would he ask such a basic rudimentary question? Well, I guarantee you, if you sat, if Steve's in there facilitating or you facilitate it yourselves and you go, well, how do we make money? Oh, well, we sell X or we deliver this service. Well, in order for us to deliver that service, what has to work? Oh, well, we need this system, we need this process, we need this data, we need this, and this, right? And okay, well, do we always have access to that data? And who's responsible for that? Does everybody have access to that data? Should everybody have access to that system? And you will be surprised if you just start with how do we make money and work your way down what's called data flow diagrams. Where does the data flow? Who has access to everything? You'll find that I had no idea we were moving these contracts that should only be here to this marketing tool that's now in the cloud that 15 people in marketing have access to, and they're highly confidential. And you'll go, holy God, how did that ever happen? Just based on the question of how we make money and what do we do to continue to do, to do those things.
yeah.
So.
One of the slides from our security officer thing was a list of software that we didn't recognize, but that somebody was accessing, and it was amazing. You could walk in with a slide of like 20 software listed, and the owner, the executive, is like, yeah, I don't know what that is. And someone speaks up that, oh, that's this new thing that we've been doing for 5 years. It's the most important thing that we do. But if we're not trying to make sure that we know every bit of software on their network, the client in a lot of cases didn't even know what it was, or there were some that no one in the room knew what it was, and we had to go track down another way or via another person. But
The scary part, though, and as you know, Steve, too, you never want to find out that there's a software that no one knows about, and it's actually a threat actor has implemented that software, which is a very common tactic if you don't have a good, what's called blacklist, whitelist of your software, which again, a guy like Steve will do a very good job making sure that they're not installing things that shouldn't be on your network, which is called living off the land. Another term that's used from other means, but that threat actors use this because it's not detected, right? Oh, well, of course they should have this in the network, but.
Well, we're coming near the end of our time. Was there a specific point you wanted to make about AI or something you want to throw out there that would be, high value?
Yeah, I hope it's high value, Steve.
Everything you say is high value.
Yeah, I would just say this, AI is right all the rage. There's some simple things I would tell everybody again, and they go hand in hand a lot with what we've spoken about today, Steve. The biggest concern you as an executive should have about AI is number one, where your data is. Now that's a loaded, big, wide question, Steve, but we know from the research that people are using, if they're like, well, my owner doesn't, or my business doesn't allow us to use, Chat GPT or Copilot Microsoft. They don't allow us to use those things. We know from the data that they're going to use their home version because they want to be more efficient and get their job done. We also know from the data, HR and legal departments are the number one offenders. Go figure. We know that when that data goes into a public GPT, guess what? It's no longer your data. So just again, think things through about, what are we going to allow? What are we not going to allow? And if you don't know, again, speak to your managed service provider. And again, if they don't have a good answer for you, you probably want to call someone like Steve who understands how to approach this from a good policy perspective, how to look at your data. That's what I would like to close with, Steve.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've been, we're talking a little bit more on the privacy side of things now, but, we really we're working to encourage our clients that, hey, if you do nothing, your employees are going to find something. So you've got to make some decisions on these things, even if you don't feel like you're ready or not sure what you want to do. You've got to start somewhere because, every time we turn around, there's like new tools popping up on the network. I can't remember the number for the new AI tools that are out there, but someone can go just browse to a website, think it's an innocuous application, and upload your data, not realizing that all of a sudden your data is now part of the LLM and shared with everyone else out there. So, a good point on making sure that you've got your arms around that. Yeah. Well, Andrew, we bumped through a lot today. As your doctor, I kind of have to ask you, what if there was one thing that you would say would be your big takeaway from our conversation today? What would you say that was?
Yeah, if there's anything I could implore business leaders and executives to do is get involved. They set the state. They're the captain of the ship, right, Steve? And the employees take their lead. If they don't care about risk, how do you expect your employees to care about risk? They won't, because they don't see it, right? It's like a good NFL coach, right? That the ones that lead, you have great results, so.
Yeah, out of the business framework, it talks, scaling up talks about one of the biggest things there is, what does it say? It's 1% vision and 99% alignment. Basically getting everyone swimming together, everyone working together. If you're not setting that tone, if you're not setting that standard, then no one else is going to follow. Just over the years, every security project or lots of security project, you could talk about all the things that need to be done, but if the top guy isn't supporting it, it typically just doesn't happen. It's just a failed effort out there. Yep. Any other minor prescriptions that go along with that, besides getting the getting one of the top guys as the champion for cybersecurity?
Yeah, like I said, I just think there's approach it from, you don't have to come at it of, hey, we need to spend a lot of money. I think coming at it pragmatically, Steve, where have you ever done a tabletop, right? I like do things that you haven't done before that take you out of your comfort zone. Put yourself in a compromised position. We're down. What would we do? Would you know who to call? Would you know, do you have, network, I'll use a term here real quick, Steve. You're a manufacturer. Do you have, network segmentation, which means, hey, can we still use our cranes and our manufacturing equipment, and produce our widgets, but maybe our data is offline over here, right? So walk through your worst day, right, and figure out how good or bad you are. Maybe you're awesome. Great, you're awesome. Then you'll tweak a few things in the postmortem. But until you walk through your worst day in a simulated environment, I'd way rather work through my worst day in a simulated environment, because I've worked with far too many companies in their real worst day, and it's just horrible. It's not a pleasant situation. So
Yeah,
that's right.
There's a reason why if the wedding day is an important day of your life, why you do a rehearsal. You kind of want to make sure that you get it right before you get going. I know you probably aren't looking for our audience to call or email you, but any resources or things out there that you'd like to encourage the people to check out or
Yeah, I mean, even though we talk a lot about it from the managed service provider side, Steve, they can always listen to on YouTube. If you go to the Write a Boom website, every week we have the Write a Boom podcast called the CyberCall, and you can learn a ton. I mean, even though we're talking about it from your vantage point, Steve, again, we have tons of resources that they can listen to and see and hear, and so.
Yeah, I would recommend it. The topics vary greatly. So it may not be something you watch every week or all the time, but there's almost always a topic that stands out that goes, oh, wow, I don't think I can get that topic anywhere else. Let me check this out. So I would highly recommend it. And then as for me, you can always reach me via email, the doctor, all spelled out, at fulcrumgroup.net. Or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you do on LinkedIn, I typically only accept LinkedIn invites from people I've met face to face or that I'm doing business with. So if you reach out on LinkedIn, mention that you are listening to my podcast and got my name that way. And that brings us to the end of the doctor's appointment. I think we've learned a little bit how the technology leadership is so important for a key person to kind of take that mantle, to not feel like it's all about firewalls and software, but understand that leading a security initiative, leading an organization, it's about communication, it's about trust, and it's about turning risk into resilience. So make sure you're taking a lead there in those efforts. Andrew, any final thoughts?
Be safe.
Be safe. Don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast format. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, everywhere you think you can find one. Also, don't forget to like us or comment if you want to talk more about a topic or express your opinion. And I'm your host, Steve the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is out. See you next time. Thanks so much. Thanks, Andrew.